on there. I'll call to order the March Finance Committee meeting. Good afternoon, everybody. All committee members are participating in person. Because a non-committee member, Council Member Barbara Burke, is participating virtually, the North Carolina General Statute states this meeting is a virtual or remote meeting and is being streamed live. And we do have all the committee members here, Ms. Adams, Mr. McIntosh, Mr. Taylor, and myself. Before we get started, I do want to announce that tomorrow, the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee will begin a half hour earlier at 4 o'clock. So tomorrow, the meeting that takes place at this time will be at 4 instead of 4:30. With that, we will begin with the consent. Ms. Adams has asked that we pull 6, 7, 8, and 9. They all have to do with mowing. I've got those on the list. Is there any other items anyone would want pulled?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the balance.
Mr. Taylor's made a motion for the approve the balance. Do I have a second?
Second.
Now, I'm not sure how we're voting now. Oh, excuse me, they're on the screen. If everybody please vote. Thank you. It is approved, I'm assuming. We will take 6, 7, 8, and 9 collectively. Madam Clerk, if you could just read 6, just to get it on the record.
Item C6, resolution awarding a contract for mooring services for Group 1, Piedmont Landscape Management Company, Incorporated.
Thank you. And 7, 8, and 9 are also included. Ms. Adams, you have the floor.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank staff for making a very, look like to me, intentional effort to make these contracts equitable to the bidders, minorities, women's, and others. My question is on, I guess, the first one, C6, is the contract that was offered to or bidded to Piedmont Landscape Management Company for $738,640. On one sheet, and it may be a typo, but again, I read it. On one of the sheets where it has the bid list, it lists Piedmont Landscaping in Winston-Salem, but on the CARF, it lists them in Moxville. Which one is it, may I ask? And then, Mr. Taylor, on the...
Let's get an answer to that one first.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi.
Good evening to everyone. Chairman Claude, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, other members of the committee. I will confirm, because I believe that is a typo, or it shows that this particular company is in Winston-Salem in one place and in Clemens the other. I will clarify that.
And also on the Exhibit A, would you check for that too? Because I noticed on a few of them, it has like business location and it gives the points within Winston, within North Carolina and outside of North Carolina. And it basically gave them 5 points for within Winston-Salem and 3 points within North Carolina. Again, that's why I'm going back. Are they in Winston-Salem or not? I also noticed...
Mr. Taylor, go check on that between now and the committee, board meeting.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
I also noticed that in this, that Piedmont Landscape Management Company is I think it's a W company.
Yep, says W.
But I also noticed that maybe the council or I need more clarification, like, looks like on our bid list, there are over 50% minority businesses that do this sort of work. And, to have it go to a female, I mean, I have no issue with that. But, in one respect, I did happen to see a docuseries the other night, and it talked about how in the scope of the 3 years of what we've had in the country, of trying to help make things more equitable and for minorities and others, that we tend to think that if we put things on our website, and again, council has heard me say and staff, when we use the catchphrases equitable and intentional and diversity and inclusion, that we're going to have to go further than that versus using that as a tagline. We need to now, the persons in the documentary said that, and these were businessmen who were multimillionaires that are now putting up their money to help minorities and marginalized communities. I think we're going to have to look at other ways of helping the playing field be more equitable. And I don't know whether that comes through infrastructure money or whether it comes through ARPA, but if you got over 50% of your bidders that have all of the qualification paperwork, but maybe they don't have all the equipment as you listed in your report, then somehow or another, we as the city and others, government, non-government business partners, have now got to figure out a way, how do we help these businesses become more economically self-sufficient? I can cut lawns, but if I got 2 lawnmowers, and I can bid on your contracts, but if all I got is 2 lawnmowers and you're requiring me to have 5 or 10, then that's not equitable. The playing field for the process is not equitable. So I would hope that the city will begin to look at more ways to level the playing field. Are we doing just C6, Chairman Clark?
Well, I was going to do them all. Do you have comments on the others? They're all great.
Yeah. I looked at C7 is basically like that, but C8, when we gave, again, I commend staff. There were 8 contracts for the lawn mowing in C8 in the vegetation. I commend you in this one for distributing it based on the law. You gave contracts to Latino Hispanics. There was contracts for African Americans, and there was contracts for also white businesses. So that one I was good with. Again, I like the way you did that. I know it wasn't intentional, I know, but the fact is you recognize that with minorities, particularly Latino Hispanics and African Americans, some of our contracts that we've noticed over the past 5 or 6 years are contracts that these marginalized groups can't bid on because they don't have the equipment and the resources. So with this one, again, I was just glad to see that we did something that we could say we did well on it. And 9 is the same way. I want us to, again, when we make these contract bids to marginalized groups, we need to make sure that we are checking all the paperwork and it reads according to what we're doing, because I don't want people to think that we're not doing what we say. So that's why I'm asking you to go back for Monday's meeting, look at the paperwork and C6, 7, 8, and 9, make sure it lines up to the contracts and the groups and businesses that got them.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any other council members? Mr. McIntosh?
My question is on C6, or in the CARF, the language says contract 1A is for Business 40 Salem Parkway, Highway 421. Contract 1B is for Highway 52. Those are state roads. Do we get reimbursed by the state for our maintenance on those?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I figured, I didn't think that would slip through, but I just want to make sure.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Adams, can I get a motion on 6,
I
7, 8,
move
9?
that, Chair Clark, that we approve C6, C7, C8, and C9.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve C6, 7, 8, and 9 from consent. If everybody please vote when your machine indicates. That is approved. Thank y'all very much. That is it for consent. We will now move to the general agenda. If the clerk will please read G1.
Item G1, consideration of items related to budget ordinances for the coronavirus local fiscal recovery funds.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee and council. It's good to be back in person, even though it's a little different than it used to be. If we could get the presentation called up. This item before you does essentially 2 things. I am going to try and walk you through those 2. It seems that every time I try to do this, I still Get a little lost in the details myself, but we're essentially going to do two things. We're going to talk about Treasury's lost revenue calculation, and then we're going to talk about actual city fund balances that we might restore. And those two are completely separate, and we're going to talk about them in the same presentation, but call them separate for a very specific purpose. So if we'll go to the first slide, the U.S. Treasury allowed through the final rule that you could use either $10 million or a calculation that they provided to determine what your lost revenue was from the pandemic. We have done that calculation. It is significantly higher than $10 million. It's roughly $31.3 million, what you see in the CARF. Any money that has been done through this calculation can then be used for any governmental service. We're going to talk about what that means, but it essentially means removing a lot of the eligibility, reporting, and auditing restrictions from that funding by showing it being used for a governmental service. In our case here, we're going to use public safety salaries. Next slide. So a quick walkthrough here. So we performed, our finance department did those revenue loss calculations. The final rule allows you to do it every year at the end of a fiscal year. We have done it for 2 years so far. We will do it again at the end of 22 and 23, and if that changes, we'll bring it back to you. So in identifying governmental services, we have identified public safety salaries. Salaries are much easier to show as expenses in federal grant reporting than are procurement for other services and contracts. That's why we're using a payroll function. We are going to transfer those funds out of our ARPA fund to our general fund to cover those public safety salaries that are budgeted in the general fund. And those will be reported to the U.S. Treasury that way, that they were used for the governmental service of providing public safety service. So down to the next slide. We talked about this just briefly, but in terms of compliance implications for why we're doing this, very significantly lower burden for federal reporting. So we just plug in $31.3 million worth of public safety salaries rather than having to show where we would otherwise have spent all of that ARPA money within a framework. And again, that streamlined procurement and audit requirements. The audit requirements for federal government are significantly more stringent than our standard audit requirements, and obviously showing payroll instead of a multitude of contracts is much easier to show. So from a staff perspective, it is much easier to show this for any governmental service as payroll function. It also, again, as we're going to talk about here, loosens up the eligibility requirements that are strictly associated with the ARPA funds. We will show this money in general fund balance as being dedicated to a specific purpose, so we will still intend, or staff recommends intending and using it per the framework. It will just be in a different fund at this point. And again, in terms of the flexibility, that flexibility becomes basically anything that we can use it for a public purpose. So anything that we could otherwise do, you no longer get tied to the same ARPA strings of having to respond to COVID or having to meet one of the other criteria that we've talked about multiple times. So staff is going to request, and per one of the budget amendments, ask that you do this, just make it a little bit easier for us on the back end, as well as change the eligibility and expand it. Next slide. So going forward, staff will show you when we're appropriating things that are in the ARPA fund versus when it comes out of this pot of general fund money that we're moving it to. If it's in the ARPA fund, we're still going to have the full audit requirements on a part of it. Staff is creating a template, and we will essentially, when we do summaries, bring back to you what portion of this is sitting in the ARPA fund and is the federal money still, and what part of it is now the local money and how we're using it. We're going to continue to track all of this, and we will report it publicly. We have a dashboard already stood up on our COVID-19 page that shows how the framework is being used. All of that funding, whether it's technically the federal funding or whether it's been used through this any governmental service process and is now in general fund, we're going to show all of that spending and where it's been done. We are completely committed to openness and transparency in this process, so no one in the public needs to worry about whether or not we're going to show how that money is spent. We are going to show it all. Next slide. So here's where I'm going to transition here. So what we just talked about was a calculation for $31.3 million, and we're going to put it in fund balance by showing it as having been used on public safety salaries. The next part of the presentation is going to talk about one use of that, which is restoring city fund balances. So where I don't want to get caught up here is thinking that we lost $31.3 million. That's just what the calculation allows. So next slide. Staff is recommending, after having done an analysis, taking $5.6 million and putting it into the following funds. So roughly $2.5 or $2.6 million into the Fairgrounds Fund, $1.8 million into the Downtown Ballpark Fund, just over $500,000 into the Occupancy Tax Fund, and just under $700,000 into the Parking Fund. When council was first apprised of ARPA, however many months ago or years ago it was now, we talked about one of the main priorities being some of the funds that were really being devastated as a result of the economic conditions at the time. These are those funds. We have done a separate analysis that looked both at actual revenue loss that was in these funds compared to kind of net loss or net profit loss, and are using a different methodology based on whichever one makes sense. I don't think you guys want to go into the details, but I'm more than happy to explain them if we need to. But we are recommending roughly $5.6 million be allocated back to those special revenue and enterprise funds for the monies that they lost or have lost so far during the pandemic.
Thank you. So the specific topic that we will be voting on is just the $5.6 million.
So there are two budget amendments that are associated with this. One is to move $31.3 million to cover public safety salaries, thereby falling to general fund balance. And the other one is to appropriate $5.6 million of that $31.3 million and move it back to these enterprise funds and special revenue funds.
Okay, let me see if any questions, comments. Ms. Adams?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tesh. The funds, I appreciate staff selecting these fund balances. Was transportation considered? I know that it gets a little bit more money on a consistent basis, not just from us, but the feds and whatever. But in fact, that people weren't riding the bus and the numbers, and we saw it. Was there any consideration for monies going towards transportation?
The initial consideration of the transit fund for that question was there was a lot of federal money, both in the CARES Act and in ARPA, and you'll actually see an amendment for some ARPA funds in the transit fund on this agenda. Because there was an influx of so much federal money, we didn't do the calculations. If you would like to see that, we could. I would tell you the net effect is anything that you add back to a fund balance in a fund is something that may not show up on the framework to be spent in the community. So one of the staff considerations was we were looking at, was there really a loss there? And if there was, is that money better used in the community per the framework, or restoring a fund balance to make sure a fund had financial solvency? In this case, because of all the federal money that came through, we did not see the need to do that, but can go back and do those calculations if you'd like us to.
Thank you. I just wanted that put out there. I read the other agenda item about the transportation money, but I just wondered where transportation fit in your selection process when you were deciding which fund balances had the most impact. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Scipio?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tesh. This is as clear as most muddy water for me. So just so that I understand a couple of things, when we talk about public safety salaries, that's both the Winston-Salem PD and the fire department.
In this case, I think we would look to use only one or the other if we could. There's probably enough public safety salary just in police to cover these, but we went ahead and said public safety in case there are additional calculations done in the future and we might need to use fire as well.
Okay, so it could be a hybrid. Now, just so that I am understanding this formula, 31.3 million is a formula that you've worked out. How does that equate to the 71 million ARPA dollars? Is this a paper transfer, a book, or is it actual cash?
So it's $51.7 million. And I don't know what you mean by paper transfer, but I'm going.
Do we take the 31 off of that and then have a balance left to use or not?
So we're taking the 31 and moving it basically to another place, but using it for the same purpose. So it's still going to show up in that total $51.7 million. We're not reducing the amount available for programming by $31 million. No, ma'am.
That's basically so that's a paper transfer.
Yes,
What
ma'am.
I'm considering is a book transfer, how we do that. All right. Now, so there's no plan for the balance of that. Right now, we're doing 5.6 million, but there's no plan or recommendation for the balance of that
So
What's left out of that 31.3?
there is an exhibit, again, we're going to use it per the framework, or we'll make recommendations. There's an Exhibit A to the item, which shows Phase 1 programming, those monies that have already been appropriated and are being used, and then Phase 2 and beyond, what we call it. So although that money has been paper transferred, we'll call it, there would be no difference in the way that the framework sees it from a programming perspective. There's still $20 million worth of housing investments that we are showing, and again, an item for that with the state money as well. Social assistance and economic assistance totaling $10.5 million in the framework, $5 million set aside for digital divide. And then the change here would be, you see that $7.75 million in the framework, that has become 5.6. We wanted to show the original framework as we've shown it before so that you could see the difference between the amount that we're actually proposing versus what was in the original framework. We will amend that framework and bring it back later with the new number.
Yeah, and this chart, Exhibit A, has not changed for a while. We've had that in front of us for quite a while. Mr. McIntosh. And then-
The funds that are receiving the 5.6 million, I know we've seen some pretty scary, ugly graphs about the trajectory of those funds on several occasions. Could we get an updated one? I'd love to see one that's not just down and to the right.
During budget development, we're going to bring those graphs back to you. We have to update all the pro formas in order to do it.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson, did you have your hand up?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Scott, what happened to the $7,750,000, which was allocated, and I think we're now asking for 600,000?
Yeah, so that 7.75 number becomes the 5.5 million roughly that we're looking here. That difference will be programmed back into the framework per decision by the city council. So in not using that 7.75 million fully for fund balance restoration, it becomes available through the framework for any other purpose that you so deem. So we will.
Staff feels comfortable that the funds are fully renewed or renewed with this 5.6 million. Does make us whole again on all these funds?
It makes us whole through the end of last fiscal year. So after we do the calculations again at the end of '23, if city council would like, we can bring that back to you, or at the end of '22, and kind of show you, again, the fairgrounds is a great example of this, having not had a full fair in terms of the normal revenue and participation that you would have seen. There's probably some linger effect of the pandemic in the fair this past October. So we could do those calculations again for the fairground and bring it back to you if you'd like to kind of leave that plug number there for additional pandemic-related loss in FY22.
If we have a whole year out that we have not calculated our revenue loss for these funds, we need to be very cautious about saying what we've accomplished here with this. I mean, I think that's a priority, it should be a priority to make our funds whole again.
I'm more than happy to leave that in the framework and have that discussion again with the financial statements as of June 30th of this year.
Yeah, there's no doubt that 2020, they were all hit hard, but they were also hit hard in 2021, the fair being a good example where it was open but wasn't like the good old days. Any other questions or comments in this area? Can I get a motion on number G1, please?
Move for approval, Mr.
There's a
Chair.
second?
Second.
We have a motion second on G1. Will you please vote when it comes up on your screen? Okay, thank you. That is approved. Before we go to G2, I just want to bring this up, and maybe I'll pass this on to the city attorney. When I was listening to the radio this morning, Representative Alma Adams, who used to represent us, had just introduced legislation to allow recovery money to be used for housing. And we've already done that. So if someone could please follow up on what she's introduced. And, you know, the news is the same every 30 minutes. So I did listen to it twice. But if somebody could just check on that. And she was one of two people that introduced it. Thank you. We will now go to G2. If the city clerk will please read this one.
Item G2, resolution authorizing the purchase of 12 collection vehicles from Carolina Environmental Systems in the amount of $4,020,000 for in-house recycling collection services.
Mr. Taylor, if you could give us a 2-minute on this one.
Good afternoon to everyone again. This is a request for council approval to seek 12 collection vehicles so that at the end of 1 year into our new contract, we're able to take advantage of in-house collections. We have to move now, if at all possible, due to the supply chain issues and the ability to get hold of chassis and the bodies. So this particular action will allow us to bring the service in-house and just bring a better or a higher level of service and more control. Purchasing the vehicles now has a lot of advantages, one being the prices continue to escalate. So this is an effort to just make our program better.
And Mr. Taylor, if I can remember from the presentation on recycling, by us doing the pickup, we were going to save several $100,000 a year, I believe.
Yes, sir, Chairman Clark. In fact, over the period of 9 years, we will be able to save approximately $4 million.
Thank you, sir. Good. And the Finance Committee will take credit for that saving. Is there any questions on this one? Ms. Scipio?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor, the source of these funds for the purchase,
Source of the funds?
yeah, for the $4 million, coming from,
We actually budget, have a contract, money is budgeted every year for recycling. And so the actual monies would actually come from that particular line item.
okay, thank you.
Can I get a motion on G2, please?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on G2. If the committee members will please vote as comes up. Let me just make a general comment. It is very difficult seeing folks here, so do not be bashful if you want to speak. I'm trying to look around, but it's just different. If to Ms. Burke, I don't know, I can see you vaguely, but feel free to yell or scream if you want to be heard. I'm trying to be fair to everybody, but it's just kind of difficult with the paraphernalia up here. We will now go to G3. If City Clerk, please read that one.
Item G3, resolution awarding contract for code enforcement supplemental services to Municipal Service State Code Enforcement Incorporated.
Ms. Tony, are you going to present this, or who's going, Mr. Newman? Who would like to? Ms. Newman, probably. I see Ms. Newman in the back. Does anybody want to speak on G3?
I can speak on it.
Wait a minute, Ms. Newman's coming. Ms. Tony, somebody who wants to be on TV today? You can
Good
just give us a
afternoon.
2-minute on this one, thank you.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Vice Chair Adams, members of the committee, members of the council, Mayor Joines. Good afternoon. I'm Marla Newman, Community Development Director. So before you is a recommendation on a selected vendor to perform contract code enforcement services for the Code Enforcement Division of Community Development. As you all may know, the community development, like many other city departments, has suffered a loss in staff. Largely, we've seen this drop in staff during these last 2 years of the COVID pandemic. In an effort, however, to try to return to some level of service that adequately serves the community, we, in partnership with the purchasing department, issued an RFP for contract services to supplement while we continue to advertise and hope to hire code enforcement staff to return to normal staffing levels. This is a 1-year contract with the opportunity to renew for 2 additional years. And so before you now is the selected vendor who we believe can perform those services at a level that will be satisfactory for our citizens.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions or comments on G3? Ms. Adams?
Yes. Again, I want to thank Community Development Department and staff. You've heard our cry. The most need are in the marginalized communities of our city, the north, northeast, east, and southeast. Whereas we always knew when we would receive complaints in community development, blighted housing, lawns, whatever, we would be the ones to see it. But it's not just us seeing it. Our citizens and constituents expect their council members and the staff to do something. And as I communicated to the city manager, Ms. Newman, Ms. Tony, you've heard me say, council, mayor, we're in a new age of work. And it didn't just happen last year and year before. It started happening in 2019, before COVID even hit, when we started to see decreases in people wanting to be employed, not just in the city, but in all cities. And we have now got to be like the NBA and the NFL. We now got to go find people, because the people aren't coming to us because they got so many choices now. We have to recruit and go get the help. I did notice the bid list, and none of these companies, except for Greensboro and Durham and Kannapolis, are in North Carolina. That just shows that this need is also needed all over the country, and these companies are getting these offers because cities can no longer provide the staffing to go do the job. So I commend you and the Department of Community Development for taking the initiative to go and get help, because it's been a while now that we've been struggling to get the inspections done. Mr. Taylor, I comment again, your staff, for bringing in the lawn and vegetation, because it's raining, people, and the temperatures have now jumped to spring, almost summer, and the grass is going to grow. So if we can get ahead of it, again, particularly in our marginalized communities where the most need is, our citizens will be very thankful, as well as the council members that represent those wards. So I applaud you. Thank you.
Mr. Mundy.
Thank you for the information. A question, do you envision this as being a temporary model until we can get employees back and working full-time, or might this become a new business model?
The hope is that this is temporary, but we factored in the fact that it may not be, and which is why we have built into the contract additional 2 years after the first year. And it may be that we would just use them at a lesser level, depending on how many staff we're able to hire. Ordinarily, we have 10 code officers plus a housing inspector supervisor, and then a senior project supervisor. Today, we have simply 5 code officers.
Yeah.
Do you have a feel for, on a percentage basis, say per inspector, how much more using a contract employee is versus a full-time employee? Or is it cost neutral?
Oh, no, using a contract employee
wouldn't think so.
is far less expensive because we don't cover benefits and some of the other things that are factored into a staff position. However, we just believe that if we're able to hire permanent staff, that serves the citizens better, but we are willing to do a contract to carry us over until we can get to that point.
Thank you. I'm going to watch this closely. I think it's a great idea to bring folks in to help us fill in those gaps when we don't have people working for us.
Thank you.
Like, I have a number of folks that want to speak. I'm just going to go down my list. Scipio.
Thank you. Ms. Newman, I think you may have answered my first question. We had a total of 12 staff in code enforcement, and now we're down to 5?
No, we have more than that in code enforcement. We had 10 officers, a housing inspector supervisor, and a senior project supervisor. The senior project supervisor just recently retired. The housing inspector took a position in another municipality. And so now we are at 5 code officers.
5 of 10 that we used to have.
Yes, ma'am.
And this contracted service, are they bringing a dedicated number of staff? Or
Yes.
are they to fulfill so many services a month, or how does that work?
Dedicated staff. So they will have a minimum of 3 staff
3.
that will supplement our 5.
Okay. Do you think that's sufficient?
Beg your pardon?
Do you think that's sufficient?
I think it will be for starters, yes, ma'am, because we already have applications and we're scheduling interviews in the next few weeks for some of the applicants we have. So we think that's a good number to start with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is, you finished? Okay. Ms. McIntosh, you're next.
Yeah, in my 9 years on council, we go through these cycles where we outsource and then when we bring things back in. I'm thinking about the street sweeper process that we brought back in, and that was for the purposes of increasing the level of service for the amount of money that we spend. But sometimes, as in right now, some things make more sense to go out to the private market and to contractors on. City manager, what other areas of other departments could benefit from this? I mean, I'm thinking about building codes, building inspectors, engineering. I mean, some of the things that we're having trouble filling, are there opportunities to increase the level of service and not break the bank?
Good evening, Chairman Taylor. Chairman Chumry. See, these things are doing tricks of my eyes. Chairman Clark and members of the Finance Committee, Mayor Joines, and other council members. The Councilor McIntosh, we're actually looking at that as we speak. We're going to be bringing, we're looking at some contracts to supplement our sidewalk repair and maintenance, some other street work, and looking at several areas. We have a significant amount of salary savings with upwards of 500 or more vacancies. So we have a significant amount of salary savings in the general fund. So we're looking at some multi-year contracts to augment and potentially ramp up and then ramp down if necessary. So we're looking at a lot of areas where we could potentially outsource it. The trade-offs, as always, you're correct, over the years we've gone both ways, is I think they work well a lot of times for short-term supplements. Long-term, some of the struggles you have is just the contractor may not understand the constituents in the community as well as city staff might, so there's always that balance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Burke, you're next.
Thank you, Chair Clark. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the Finance Committee. I wanted to first of all say thank you to our city manager for agreeing to contract out code enforcement officers. And I want to say thank you to Ms. Tony and Ms. Newman and your entire department. As I've been on city council for over a year now, I'm able to see firsthand everything that Mayor Pro Tem just said as far as the need and the growing needs in the Northeast Ward as well as the East and Southeast wards. The code enforcement officers that we have are doing an outstanding job with the limited number of workers that we have, but they need more. Our constituents are going to be thrilled and happy that we have some additional help because they have been calling in daily complaining about code enforcement issues, and we're just stretched thin and doing the best that we can. So this is a big step. It is a necessary step, and I want to say thank you to any and everyone for making this possible.
Thank you, ma'am. See no other excuse me, Ms.
Yeah, I have one more comment. We were in the National League of Cities last week, and a former colleague in another city and her council members were telling Councilmember Burke and I and Councilmember Clark about their new hiring practices, and that they had a job fair, and they had like 35 openings, and they were able to fill like 21 of them. And they were telling me that they brought, I call it the hype to the job fair. And I know we have a job fair coming up, but I hope, again, that we as the city understand the world of work has changed. You just can't have your regular old job fair with some posters and a table and a sign up. You got to bring the hype to make people feel like they want to be a part of our team. So I'm hoping that Dr. Barnett and any of you that's got tables at that job fair, you can't do it for this one, but again, I need us to be thinking futuristically, innovatively. How do you get someone now in the new world of work to come and be a part of our team? And they were quite excited to tell me that they got a couple of our people. So it's on now, okay?
Okay. Can I get a motion on G3, please?
I move for approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion second on G3. If the committee will please vote when it comes up. That is approved. Thank y'all very much. We will now go to G4. If the city clerk will please read this one.
Item G4, resolution authorizing the sale of city-owned land by private sale to Front Street Capital via negotiated offer and upset bid, North Carolina General Statute 160A-269.
Mr. Millett, if you will come up and please give us a brief presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Clark. Good afternoon, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and members of council.
Good afternoon.
As you know, the Union Cross Road, Temple School Road area has been targeted as an area for economic development since the early 2000s. The area continues to grow as a center of industrial activity, including prominent facilities for Herbalife and Progress Rail. In 2018, approximately 72 acres at Union Cross Road and Axel Drive were identified as one of the last large tracts available in the immediate area for future industrial development. At the time, the property was in the unincorporated area of Forsyth County and zoned agricultural. The city negotiated purchase of the property for approximately $3.8 million. We used 2014 general obligation bond funds for that. The property was subsequently annexed into the city and rezoned for light industrial use in 2021. Due to its proximity to infrastructure and Interstate 40, the city believes the property offers a unique site primed for industrial and business park growth, resulting in job creation and expansion of the tax base. In November 2021, we issued a request for proposals for the purchase and development of the site. Two developers, both of which were local, submitted proposals, Front Street Capital and Williams Development. The proposals were reviewed by an internal panel of city staff, were evaluated for criteria that included a description of the proposed project, the developer's experience with similar projects, and benefits to the city, including a proposed purchase price. The evaluation panel recommends Front Street Capital as the purchaser and developer of the property. Their overall proposal scored the highest and offered the highest purchase price of $8 million. Front Street Capital, you may be familiar with them. They have developed over 3 million square feet of industrial space in Forsyth County, including the adjacent 100 acres at Union Cross Industrial Center. Upon approval, their intent is to immediately begin the design and planning for a 250,000 to 300,000 square foot speculative building. It would be the first of 3 proposed facilities on the property, and job creation could total between 50 and 200 plus jobs per facility. Projections are for a total investment of $63 million and annual tax revenue totaling $700,000 to $1.1 million upon park completion. Under provisions of North Carolina General Statute 160A-269, a notice of the proposed sale will be published that within 10 days, any person may raise the bid by not less than 10% of the first $1,000 and 5% of the remainder. If a qualified bid is received, the city will re-advertise the offer at the increased bid price, and this procedure will be repeated until no further qualifying bids are received. City Council can then accept the offer and sell the property to the highest bidder or reject any and all offers. In the event that no upset bid is received, the property will be sold to Front Street Capital without further action from City Council. If raised bids are received, City Council confirmation will be required. Staff recommends that in order to qualify, any upset bid must meet the following standards met by Front Street Capital's proposal. That is, the target construction of a minimum of 625,000 square feet of combined industrial space, achieve a total taxable investment of $60 million upon park completion, prioritize tenants and/or end users that provide quality jobs, maximizing new job creation for the community, and that they initiate the construction process of a speculative or end-user facility within 180 days of closing on the property. Staff also recommends that the proceeds be deposited into the Economic Development Project Fund for future investments in sites and infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any questions or comments? Oh, Mr. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I wish all of our projects went this well.
Yes.
We've been working on sites out in that area for some time. We acquired land for Dell and now Herbalife and then Caterpillar and so on, and established some relationship with property owners there. Using the 2014 GO bonds that the voters approved, we were able to get this under contract. We had to wait to close on it because of some family issues of the family we bought it from. We did set aside some monies for the 2018 bonds because we thought we were going to maybe need to spend some money to put in driveways or prepare the site for use. But then things changed. The RFP went out. We got a super proposal, I believe, from two developers, Front Street Capital and Williams Developer. Will, as Ken mentioned, we'll get at least 625,000 square feet, maybe upwards of 900,000 square feet of space and $60+ million of investment, plus giving us speculative buildings that we can use to market to companies coming in. I totally support this this movement, but plus the fact that we need to go out and buy some more. And it's hard to find in Forsyth County because of the being able to sewer and serve it with water. But I think this will give us some operating capital in the Economic Development Projects Fund that we can hopefully find some more because we need to keep doing this. Good job, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, thank you. Mr. McIntosh?
My only problem with this deal is we can't do it more than once. It would be great to have double the land available, but this is a big economic win for us. I think it's also an opportunity for us to look at transit and housing out in that area to support this, so we're not making people commute from long distances. So, but it's excellent. I'm very happy with this.
Ms. Adams?
Yes, thank you, Chair Clark. Mr. Miller, the $8 million price tag that has been offered by Front Street, is that the best price you think we can get? And what is the going rate per acre for this site on the market as we speak right now?
The closest I can come to your second question is the tax value and the purchase price were approximately half of that $8 million when it was originally purchased. I think we will find out if this is the highest price that we can get for the property because of that built-in upset bid process, where ultimately we end up with the same quality development, the same type of development that we're looking for, but that it will ultimately end up with the highest bidder.
Do we know, or you might, did Williams Developers, did they bid as well on the first offer, or was Front Street the only?
Williams Development also submitted a bid, yes.
Are you allowed to tell us what they bidded, what they proposed? City
I
Attorney?
will ask the city attorney.
Yes, you can.
It was approximately $4 million.
Okay. The next thing I'd like, and because some of the newer council members don't know, could we get some information about Front Street and Williams as to who they are? I mean, I know they bring the money to the table, and I know we've done deals with them before, but I'd like to know who they are, where they're located, both of them, please. I also, for me, the last request that staff put in the CARF, that they recommend that from the sale, the monies be deposited in the Economic Development Project Fund for future investors in economic development. Maybe it's just me, but I have an issue with that. The next agenda item requires us to be a little bit more forward-thinking on how we're going to deal with our housing affordability issues here in Winston. And I would hope that the council, that we could Mr. Chair, I'd like to see us strike that because we don't know. I mean, we could put it there, and I know maybe you can tell me, City Attorney or Chair Clark, we do have the option to use that money any way we want as to how the council votes. Is that not correct?
I believe that is correct, Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. Carmen,
That's my understanding, yes.
so we can put it in and take it out at our convenience.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I would, Mr. Chair, I would also like to throw my hat in the ring that I would hope that council will look at this. I know we're making money. I know it's good money, but we also have some other pending issues that are coming at us that we may not be able to do just with community development block grant, just with the money we got from ARPA, just with all of the other funding sources we have, home, North Carolina Finance. I would like people to understand that we need to look at all the options because we can't use all of the monies that government allows us to use for housing on the next agenda item coming that we're just using for information, that we now have to look again at all of our options out there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr.
Can I
Chairman.
get excuse me, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I just want to, I certainly don't disagree with what Mayor Pro Tem is saying, but this money did come out of the Economic Development Bond Funds initially. And it's sort of like if we don't continue to do economic development, you're not going to have revenues to do residential development. And I realize we've got some big residential lists to do, but we don't want to kill the goose that's laying the golden eggs, certainly.
Thank you. Ms. Scipio and then Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. I think this is always a great opportunity when we have land that we can sell and get some money for our efforts, because we thought some years ago about developing this Union Cross Business Park. It's been on the map for more than 20 years. However, I'm very much in favor of this, but I'm very, very passionate about our qualified census tracts. We need economic development in those areas so that people's salaries can be lifted up, so they can buy houses and not have to deal with low-income housing. We need to think in terms of elevating those qualified census tracts as we look to the future. We have a little bit of land, and I'm going to say it is in the East Ward. It's the Delta Vision property on Old Greensboro Road, 35 acres of land that could be a wonderful economic development opportunity and bring an activity center to the side of town that has not only one, which is not that great. So as we think about moving forward for the future of this community, I love Union Cross, but I think, Mr. Taylor, that part's in your ward.
That is correct.
I got the other side, but that's wonderful. Any development is good for our city, but I want us to always be mindful of those areas that have been neglected for many, many years, since 1937. And if we continue to do things that spur the growth outside of those neglected areas, those areas will continue to be neglected and dilapidated, and then we'll have really slums again. And I know that's not what we want to do. So as we look to the future, I like having that $8 million in the Economic Development Fund so that we can lift those communities that have been neglected and forgotten over the years.
Thank you.
Ms. Scott.
Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to say, Mr. Millett, thank you for the presentation to the mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and the members of the council who spoke. Thank you for your comments. As Councilmember Scipio mentioned, this particular location, the site is in the Southeast Ward. We're excited about the opportunity to be able to create more jobs, improving our economic development, and expand our tax base. Mr. Chairman, I know we're having a good conversation. I just want to get an motion on the floor to approve this item, and we can go from there.
Thank you. So we have a motion on G4. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other comments? Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I just want everybody to understand, and there has been a lot of docuseries and things on television about housing and poverty. I just don't want Winston-Salem to forget, we are in the top 5 for poverty for population in this city. And one of the things that struck me the other night, I was watching a program, and it talked about that, as Councilmember Scipio said, there's nothing wrong with economic development and creating businesses for your city. But if you're not doing anything intentionally to uplift the communities that don't have any economic development, that live in poverty every day, then who are you working for? Who are you lifting? Because it's that part of our community that the nation sees. And again, it's only a matter of time, like we're seeing that Guilford County is on the move. And Winston-Salem, Forsyth is caught in the middle, well, at the bottom of Charlotte, Raleigh-Durham, Guilford, Winston, Forsyth. Because the way our communities look right now and our poverty rates, our education rates, our Title I schools, I'm just saying, I know the money, as Councilmember Scipio said, and Councilmember Taylor, you know I have nothing against Union Park, that development. I was with you all the way when it first started. But I want us to understand there's only so much money to go around. And if we don't start helping to intentionally allocate some of that money, just like we're doing with the contracts for the vegetation and the inspection, the other half of Winston-Salem will continue to just be as it is. One of the multimillionaires said, you got to be intentional about building generational wealth. And generational wealth doesn't come when you give one person in that family a $15 job, $1 an hour job, versus helping everybody in the family get to owning a home and a business, small business, and other things. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me have those comments.
Thank you, Ms. Burke.
Thank you so much, Chair Clark. I just wanted to echo, first of all, Councilmember Taylor, I think this is a great opportunity for your ward, and I'm happy for you, and I'm happy for the city of Winston-Salem. But I do think going forward, we have got to be intentional about creating economic development opportunities in the Northeast Ward and in the East Ward. We have got to stop saying diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've got to stop using those buzzwords if we are not going to back these words up with some actionable items. We have got to show value to these other communities, these underserved communities, these communities where we do not currently have any economic development opportunities. We have got to be authentic in having some actions behind our words going forward. So I'm happy for the Southeast Ward and this opportunity, but we have got to create these opportunities in the areas where we have the highest concentrations of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second on the floor. If we'll please vote, if the city clerk will do the computer. I don't have anything on mine. Y'all got something?
Got a motion in a second.
We do.
Oh, there we go. Excuse me, my thing cut off. All right, thank you very much. Let me make two comments. First off, I'd like to introduce Mark Owens. Mark, raise your hand there. He is the president of Greater Winston-Salem, which used to be the Greater Winston-Salem Chamber of Commerce. Now it's just called Greater Winston-Salem. Thank you for attending today, and you're always welcome. Second comment I would make, every year in the budget, we can move money left, right, up, and down. Oftentimes, we during the year, as opportunities arise, we do make special changes to the budget. So the budget is a very flexible thing, and I think one of the comments, if you go back to what Mr. Tesh mentioned, the reason he put that $31 million where he put it is it's the most flexible place you could have put it.
Right.
So anyway, don't panic. I think we take things as they come, and we will do that as well. We'll now go to the last item, G5. If the city clerk will please read this one.
Item G5, information on the Choice Neighborhoods Implementation Phase 2 funding gap.
Before we get this, is this going to be on general gov in your committee tomorrow?
As well.
Okay, thank you. You're back. Ms. Newman. Before you start, let me just make a comment. We had a special meeting, and I don't think everyone, it was a called kind of a special committee to talk about choice neighborhoods. I think it would be important to get that information out to everybody, and I don't know if that's going to be done at Ms. Adams, it's your committee at a later date. But anyway, thank you. Please continue.
Yes, sir. Again, greetings, Chairman Clark, Vice Chair Adams, members of the committee, Mayor Joines, and other council members. Again, Marla Newman, Community Development Department. What you have on the screen is a presentation that was provided in a small work group session to update members of the council about the Choice Neighborhoods development, its current status, as well as some future needs. What you have in front of you as an information item gives a brief overview about where we are right now. We are soon to be closing on the financing for Phase 1. Phase 1 is fully funded, and we expect to see dirt moving within the next 60 days, and that is at the former Brown Elementary School site. The purpose of this information item and the presentation before you is in regards to Phase 2, which is going to begin at the actual Cleveland Avenue Homes location. The development, the Choice Neighborhoods development, the redevelopment and transformation of Cleveland Avenue Homes is a 5-phase development. So we are now at the point where, although we have not yet turned dirt yet for the Brown Elementary School site, it is time to start the financing structuring for Phase 2. There is a tax credit application due in May to the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. One of the requirements of the NCHFA is that all sources of funding for that phase be identified and committed. So the developer, McCormick Barron Salazar, on behalf of the Housing Authority, has come to the city with a need because there is a gap in the funding. Today with us is Kevin Cheshire, who is the Executive Director and CEO of the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem. And I can walk through this presentation, and I think between Kevin and myself, we can answer any questions that you all may have today. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So again, here is a slight overview of the status of where we are, and this should be in your packet. Again, Phase 1 loan closing is scheduled for May. Construction is going to be completed in 2023. And then we're already looking at there being some relocation starting this fall. And we are now about to embark on financing for Phase 2. Next slide, please. There are a few results that we want to share, some of the things that we can celebrate about what's taking place with the residents of Cleveland Avenue Homes to date. Next slide. One of the good things, and we always talk about our commitment to M and WBE businesses, and you will see here that we are making some significant headway on meeting our MBE goals. There are some WBE goals, and this is just for the first part, the first phase of the development. So there will be tracking of M and WBE businesses throughout the entire project, because there is a commitment and a requirement that we bring in people from our community to work on these projects to benefit community. Next slide. So what you see here is a map that shows the Phase 1 site, which is the former Brown School Elementary School site, and you'll see it's a total of 81 units. That's at the bottom part of the middle of that slide on the screen. And then the phases 2 through 5 are in the upper graphic in the middle. And Phase 2 is actually along Cleveland Avenue itself. Originally, it was in a slightly different location, But the thought was, because Cleveland Avenue is a major thoroughfare, to do the next phase of construction on Cleveland Avenue really gives the community an opportunity to start to see transformation. And we can go to the next slide, please. And so, as you see, what had been our previous plan, it was option 3, is now option 4 that shows phase 2, again, along Cleveland Avenue. Next slide. And this is a better rendering of what that phase 2 will look like. Next slide, please. Now, this gives you the total breakdown of the number of units for the entire project by phases and by bedroom size. You'll see a 4A and a 4B, but they're all the fourth phase, but broken up because of financing considerations that we can go into it at a later time. But again, still a total of 406 units between the Brown School site and the existing Cleveland Avenue home site. And I have to reiterate that this is a mixed income development and mixed use. So there'll be activity centers on different parts of the development. And so there will also be a senior phase in the development as well. Next slide. This gives you the breakdown from an affordability standpoint, project-based vouchers, affordable or workforce homes, and those traditionally are looked at from a low-income housing tax credit perspective. And then you see the market rate units, which are fair market rate for this community. And so that gives you the total mix. So as you can see, you have a little less than half that are traditionally geared towards public housing residents. Currently, Cleveland Avenue Homes is 244 units. Essentially, 199 of those 244 will be replaced. 45 units will be represented by housing choice vouchers. So that'll still be 244 total, but 45 families or households will receive vouchers. 199 will be on site. Next phase. Here's an example of some of the interiors. And we have worked closely with residents to pick finishes and colors and the looks of the interiors. So these have been a collaborative endeavor to look at the designs, both interior actually and exterior. It's very important that those who will be living in the homes have a voice in the way their homes look. So this has been a very engaged process with the residents. Next slide. Just another floor plan that is a part of the mix. Next slide, please. I know this is rather small, but it actually starts walking us through the financing. And as you see in the far right corner, or far right side of the page, phase 2, you start to see a gap. The gap we had initially when the application was approved by HUD. We knew there would be a small gap. However, due to COVID and rising construction and labor costs, the gap has grown exponentially. And that is part of the reason why we're here today, is because of the impact on the project of these increasing costs. Next slide. And so here's a summary of some of what has taken place and how quickly pricing has changed. So you'll see that we started, again, like I mentioned, about 17 million as a gap. It's now up to 46 million. You can see with the third bullet that in January of last year, we were getting pricing at $140 a square foot. 4 months later, $149. Basically 4 months later, $159, and then up to $170 as of December, and it keeps going up. Also, it's important to note that the C&I grant we received was for $30 million. This year's C&I grants were for $50 million. So clearly, HUD knows that there is a problem. We have been in constant communication with HUD and asking for some kind of concession or something to be done that provides more money, not only to our development, but in Fort Worth and some of the others who received awards in 2020, as we did, that they help us try to close this gap. Clearly, they're aware there's a gap. Otherwise, they wouldn't be giving 50 million rather, instead of 30 million, which has been the traditional amount since the inception of the program practically. Next slide, please. So we outline a number of strategies taken to reduce the gap, from value engineering to making a request to Forsyth County to help with infrastructure cost and a whole host of other strategies to try to get the cost down. Next slide. Here is some examples of where some other communities have taken steps to try to bridge some of the gap that they're experiencing. In some, a developer fee was deferred or reduced. In some other areas, a bond was undertaken to help offset the cost. So there've been a variety of strategies. And another, they went to the state and did a bond. So a number of municipalities are struggling with this and are looking for ways to close the gap. Next slide. So as I stated in the beginning of my comments, with the tax credit application that's due to NCHFA in May, we have to show that all funds are committed for Phase 2. McCormick Barron has asked that the city provide a commitment letter in April, or no later than April, that outlines the level of additional commitment we may be able to make to the project. I know they're asking us for assistance with the $8 million. Certainly, we have to defer to council's wisdom on how much of that $8 million we may be able to undertake. Again, there are a number of strategies that can be employed to pull together that $8 million. And I know we'll have some further conversation about that. And then we talk about what's remaining for a gap with phases 3 through 5. And you'll see an outline in front of you under bullet number 3. And so that's kind of the presentation on where we stand. And I'm more than happy to invite Mr. Cheshire to join me here if we can answer any questions for you.
Let me remind everybody, this is for information only today. It'll come back to, I think, both committees in April. And we're not solving or trying to eat the whole pie, but we do have to allocate or do something with $8 million in April. So everybody keep that number in the back of your mind. With that, Ms. Scipio, I see you have your hand up.
I had a couple of questions. Ms. Newman, on the page that shows the budget update with the by phases, and it says the total choice funds, it only adds up to 21 million. Mm-hmm. Where's the other 9 million?
4.5 million is for the people plan. 4.5 million is for the neighborhood plan, the critical community improvements. So of that 30 million, 21 million is for housing, and the other 9 million is split between the people plan and the neighborhood plan.
Thank you.
Okay, and then there was, oh gosh, let me see where I saw that. Somewhere there was a list of possible sources for funding, and one line item was 970 million, I believe, from TURN.
970,000.
Second page.
Page 2.
Which one
On
was
the
it?
information item.
On the card.
Existing 2014 Go Bond projects from the TURN program, it has a remaining balance of $970,000 in that particular account. So what we have here is just a variety of sources of city funds that have been identified as potential ways to help with that gap.
Yeah,
So
we asked staff to provide some suggestions, and that's what.
I had a question about the TURN funds. Those are unspent funds that were allocated for specific neighborhood rehab, correct?
Correct.
but they haven't been spent,
Correct.
which then means that those funds wouldn't be there for those neighborhoods.
Yes, ma'am. And we're not recommending that any particular pot be touched. This is just in response to the request about what are the different pots we have that have a balance. These are everything that we have found that has a balance. Yes, ma'am,
I
but
would
staff
think-
is not recommending anything of that nature.
Okay, well, I'm just concerned because I know that I had turned neighborhoods in the East Ward, and they're very in need of some support, and they haven't been able to get that support they need for those rehabs in their homes over the last, at least since I've been on council, and I think it's unfair to take the money if we haven't serviced them. Just so I know we're not, it's information.
Yeah, Mr. McIntosh?
Yeah, I want to sort of piggyback on what Councilmember Scipio is saying. Most of these items or most of these sources of funds would take away from housing projects. And I don't want to rob from Peter to pay Paul. I don't believe we've done a LOB project or a LOB funding project since several council members have come on. Could I get somebody from staff to just talk about the mechanics of how those work?
These are limited obligation bonds. Is anyone here from staff who feels comfortable commenting? And if not, we got a month here. Man, you shouldn't have stood up. They were all.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tempore Adams, members of the City Council. So limited obligation bonds as opposed to general obligation bonds. General obligation bonds, are voted on by the public, pledging the taxing power of the municipality to repay those bonds. Limited obligation bonds is a form of financing that we've used over the years to do special financings, mainly with public assembly facilities, but we did, a few years ago do it to address a number of issues, some pedestrian improvements, the Bowman Gray Stadium Improvement Project, a number of areas. With limited obligation bonds, we basically, it kind of works like a mortgage where we're pledging a city asset as the form of payment if we were called upon to have to pay off the bonds. So it's just a different form of pledging of city resources to repay those particular bonds.
Thank you. If you could include in one Thursday package just a little more information.
Yeah.
Also, those examples, if you could
Yes,
cover
sir.
those.
And also where the revenue comes from to pay them back.
And I can go ahead and share that typically we repay those bonds through our debt service fund. It is part of the debt model that we do show you all when we try to determine what our debt capacity is for new financings. So it's not only our general obligation debt, but also those limited obligation bonds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Adams and then Ms.
Yes, thank you. I guess I wanted to ask Mr. Cheshire, Chairman Clark, if you had a
go ahead.
comment.
Do you have any comments you'd like to make, sir?
Well, I'm proud of the partnership that we've got, and I think I said that when the working group met. The choice project to me was not just about the bricks and the mortar of the housing, which I know is what we're discussing today. We've had teams out there on site working out of apartments at Cleveland Avenue Homes, and we've seen resounding success already out of this grant. We've seen homeowners come out of Cleveland Avenue Homes. We've seen educational attainment, we've seen employment attainment, and we've got neighborhood projects that are a part of this grant. We've been talking today about economic development. That's part of this. We haven't even gotten into that yet. So my concern is I don't want to get it to a point where we can't move this grant forward. We have a set aside for the 9% tax credits. And if we miss this cycle, we legitimately jeopardize this grant. And I don't want to tell folks at Cleveland Avenue Homes, hey, sorry, we got Brown School done, but we're not getting to you guys until we can figure this out. We've got good momentum, and I need to keep it going. If I had it, we'd be all in on it. As I told our board when we reported this, we had $11,000 that the Housing Authority would be able to put into a project like this based on the way our funding is restricted. And I just want you all to know This is not the end game for us on phase 2. We need the commitment so that we can submit the application in May, because that's a hard deadline. And if we miss it, we lose that set aside that we have gotten from the state. But we don't have to stop looking for funds in May. We're going to continue to do that, whether that be from HUD or the philanthropic community or the county or other sources. We just got to get to May. And that would be my ask, is let's get to May, guys, so we can keep this thing going and not have to have that very difficult conversation with HUD and our residents sooner rather than later. Thank you.
I wanted to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say that, again, I want to thank Community Development, Ms. Tony, Ms. Newman, and Mr. Cheshire. Thank you, Councilmember Burke of the Northeast Ward where Cleveland is located, of us coming together over the past couple of weeks of circling the wagon, all hands on deck type mode, meeting with McCormick Barron and representatives from Congresswoman Kathy Manning's office, who will be here Friday, along with Congressman David Price, who is Chair of Appropriations in Congress. Councilmember Burke, Councilmember Clark, Councilmember Scipio, while we were in D.C. meeting with HUD, the governor's office in D.C., and others, along with Congresswoman Kathy Manning, Senator Tillis, Senator Burr, of the importance of this project for Winston-Salem. I got the feeling, and I'm sure my peers did, that we hit a good place in the process. The fact that they're coming and the fact that we got the chairman of appropriations coming. Again, this goes back to put your best clothes on, your best face on. It's go time. This may be the only time we get to sell not just Choice Neighborhood Cleveland, but Winston-Salem until Congressman Price retires. We might get some more money. And Senators Tillis and Burr, as Councilmember Clark will tell you, their offices and Senator Tillis seem very receptive as to what he can do. But we came out of D.C., as I've explained to a couple of council members. I've been to these meetings for 13 years. This was one of the most productive and best conferences I've been to, because I came away with the feeling that we're gonna get some help. The cavalry's on the way.
Thank you. We need to give 10 minutes time for the next one. Mr. Larson, I'll give you 2 minutes, and then we need to adjourn. This is for information only, remember.
Thank you, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Chairman. I remember back when we received and we were selected for this Choice Neighborhood Grant, how proud we were to be a recipient of that. We were a very competitive program, and staff did a fabulous job of pulling together a grant and finally winning it for us. We are all in on this project. We made that decision years ago. And I think now we're now looking at some rather significant deficits that we're now going to have to come up with. Looks like we're going to really need, even beyond phase 2, we're going to need another maybe $37 million, assuming the building market doesn't keep going up, and then it's going to be higher than that. So we've got to load the lift here. And it may be lob money is one way to go. I'm not sure that's unlimited, though, and it may get us through phase 2, but it's not going to get us probably to the end of the road. So I challenge staff, of course, to look and see, and I think you're absolutely right that they need to realize that the 30 million is not the 50 million that we need today to do the project. And I really encourage you to go back and let them be realistic about what they're asking us to get accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Public safety will begin at 6:05. Is that okay?
10-minute recess.
10-minute recess, 6:05. Thank you, everybody, and it's great to be back. We're adjourned.